Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of a new learning series, Masterclass, where a veteran communications leader will take us through the various nuances of communication and reputation management. This series is presented by Media Mantra and powered by Reputation Today and Comms News. Today, for the first PR Masterclass, I would like to introduce and welcome Nitin Thakur, a senior brand and communications leader currently working as the head of communications at OYO. He comes with over 2 decades of experience in reputation management and corporate building. Today, he will talk about the future of communications. This will be followed by a Q&A session with Udit Pathak, founder and director at Media Mantra. A warm welcome also to the 100 plus registered participants who have logged in today using the platform created by VirtueBlitz. For those who are attending using this platform, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A box and the moderator will try to pick as many as he can in the last 10 minutes. The hashtag for today is PR Masterclass. Please tweet using the hashtag PR Masterclass and don't forget to tag our partner at Media Mantra PR along with Rep Today Mag and Comms News. Over to you now, Nitin.
Hi, Anubhuti. Is my voice absolutely audible? The video is fine?
Absolutely, Nitin. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you for the opportunity for Reputation Today magazine. Thank you, Amit, Anubhuti, you, Rohan, and Media Mantra as well. I would love to have Udit moderate the Q&A session after finish my prepared speech. So I think with that, let's just begin. I know Anubhuti introduced me, but I will do a 30-second introduction while she also projects the first slide in the presentation. I'll ask Anubhuti's help to run the presentation for us. Uh, so I'm currently heading communications for OYO. I'm a part of their global leadership team. Uh, a lot of you would be familiar with OYO as a brand. Some of you may have actually stayed in a hotel which is OYO branding. Uh, Currently, it's a company which is based out of 35 countries. It has operations, though, of course, it's a multinational which is headquartered out of India. Uh, I'm actually relatively new to OYO. I joined them about 4 or 5 months ago. Before that, I spent 13 years heading brand and communication for an Indian conglomerate called the Max Group. Um, Earlier, I have done stints at Microsoft India, and I was also providing communication consultancy before that to quite a few Tata Group companies. So I've been in this profession for about 25 years. Uh, which is why to remain relevant for the next 25 years, I choose the topic that I do, and it's a topic which I have a lot of passion for, which is the future of communications. So I actually like to go forward 20, 25 years to see how communications may turn out to be like. Before we begin, I'm hoping that this is almost the last session in the coming few years that I have to end up giving virtually. I would have loved to have been in front of you guys on a stage or sitting on in a round table and making this very interactive. But I guess for now we'll have to make this to be a monologue. Now, I have spoken about this topic before, but when I was thinking about which topic to use for today's masterclass, uh, this was probably number 4 or 5 in priority. What actually brought it up was this ad campaign that Cadbury's launched recently. A lot of you guys would have seen this, called Not Just a Cadbury's Ad, which featured Shah Rukh Khan. Now, for those who probably didn't end up noticing the science behind the campaign, it basically was Cadbury's using a technology by a company called Rephrase.ai. It's a Bangalore headquartered company, uh, which uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to create the Shah Rukh's face and voice to promote local stores who will of course then tend to stand to gain a fair bit with Shah Rukh as their brand ambassador. And this is all done by them shooting Shah Rukh once, and then there's a overlay, basically similar technology which is also used in deepfake videos. But of course, this is being used for benefit. So I actually started thinking, wow, this is so innovative. This is hyper targeting communication using an influencer, but this has been done by advertising. Why couldn't communication function utilize such technologies to do lifelike, hyper customized video communication campaigns using their spokesperson or influencers? I mean, there's this so much that could be done. The other recent development, of course, we've seen is that the social media that platforms that we sort of use very actively now as communicators to drive our message are actually envisaging a augmented reality future, a parallel virtual world, which a lot of them are calling metaverse. Uh, Clearly a lot of action and excitement is going to happen, and therefore it is incumbent on us as communicators to actually try and think how communication would play out uh, in the future. Thank you. So, I'm not a futurist like you. A lot of you who will either who are already practicing communication or will go on to. I'm also on a day-to-day basis focused on the current challenges, which is could be planning communication, doing budgeting for the comms function, and then of course fighting it out with the procurement teams on it, planning stories, measuring social media sentiment, the whole host that forms a communicator's life. But you know, I do force myself occasionally to read up and imagine about the future. Uh, but the challenge is that most of the material that you'll find um, is predictions for the next couple of years or at best 4 5 years hence. So, you know, to my mind, someone who's reading actively, how communication will shape up in the next 4 5 years is relatively easy. So let me give you some examples. You would have read about how social eco-media chambers are forming the sophisticated fake news and how it's driving narratives and changing reputations. A lot of time, this fake news is driven by, it's sovereign sponsored, like Russia did in U.S. elections. Uh, there's this complete shift of power happening from the conventional really strong publication houses to news aggregators like Facebook, Google, and then the backlash against this that's happening. The governments that are taking actions against this. uh, for instance, the Australian government, a lot of European Union governments, and even in USA. uh, and then when you start predicting, you do realize a lot of these platforms that have become invaluable to us will be forced to break up into smaller, less powerful organizations. Or they may actually end up breaking themselves up voluntarily to avoid this. Um, we also read about how communication will play a role when the governments actually start uh, weaponizing the social media platforms for psychological warfare or for flexing their soft power for a silent takeover of cultures and societies. Uh, so, which are methods which are superior than use of armed forces. So the implications for communication and how it will shape up in the near future are huge. I mentioned metaverse, and the communicators have to start thinking about as this concept progresses in the next 2 3 4 years. uh, how does communication actually get onto the metaverse environments, and how do they communicate, and what changes and what remains the same? But you see, all of this is exciting but not exciting enough. Why think uh, you know just 2 years ahead? Why not 2 decades ahead? And especially for this group. And I think there are three reasons. First, by then, most of you will be in senior positions. I think a lot of you are starting out right now, but you will be in senior positions where you could really make a difference if you've been able to look ahead and prepare. Uh, the second is, if I through this session force you to start thinking a decade, 2 decades ahead, it will alert you to the skill sets of the future. How do you retool? How do you prepare yourself to stay ahead of the curve? And frankly, as I said, the third reason is I don't need to teach you material about the 2, 3, 4 years ahead. That's already well available. So let's start on this exciting 2 decades ahead journey. Uh, and while I do that, let me tell you, this is not some research paper. This is not based on a research paper. This is a synthesis of uh, the varied reading that I have done in the past couple of years, and therefore my own analysis that I've formed from there on. So let's paint the future. Let's move to the next slide. I think the first question in anybody's mind is, when we talk 2 decades ahead, will humans still be ruling, this earth, or actually the robots would have taken over the world? Uh, so to reach to the future of comms, I think we need to first anticipate and lay out a picture of three. One, how the human evolution will take place. Two, how the societal evolution will take place. And then, consequently, hence the third, how media and communication evolution will play out as a result of the first two. Now, let me try and address the first in slight bit of detail. Uh, we will leave out societal evolution, that's for a much longer session. And then we'll cover the evolution of media and communications. So, as far as humans go, if you guys remember reading the famous author Yuval Noah Harari's uh, novel, uh, it's called Homo Deus: A Brief History of Tomorrow. Uh, it envisions a future where humans will become a mix of the material that they already are, which is carbon, plus a mix of carbon. So, so don't start thinking that a robotic version of us is going to take over. What's likely to happen instead is what I would call humanoids. Uh, can you move to the next slide? Anubhuti, thank you. So let's understand what we mean by this. So humans will not lose their conscious, or call it the soul, uh, or the feeling of individuality, or feeling of being me. Uh, what's instead going to happen is that a combination of both variable and embedded implants will make most of the mechanical, repetitive, physical, and mental activities automated in these humanoids of the future. Uh, See, one thing I'm sure of, we as a human race will not want to be robot like, because humankind does think that they are God's gift to the universe. So we will want to retain the elements of our humanity. Uh, and of course, a lot of this development will also be curbed by regulation of not moving to the other side. Uh, and a lot of this actual hybridization, if I may say, of the human race will be cosmetic, because humans are driven by vanity and emotions. So, for instance, some of the improvements that may come uh, in these humanoids could be more stamina, more endurance, a 20 by 1 eyesight. Uh, and just to draw a comparison, even an eagle has a 20 by 4 eyesight. So on that front. On the mental side, perhaps the capability to do calculations automatically at the speed of a computer or faster, memory enhancements, the capability of faster analysis, etc. So, if you look back all of human history, the advancement of humans has been for convenience. Now, actually, therefore, if this is how one anticipates the human race will evolve, right? Let's understand, therefore, how the communication will evolve. Next slide, Anubhuti. Thank you. Uh, so how does a humanoid consume, um, information and news? Uh, just like we've automated today's jobs. Uh, Take an example: washing machine, electronic messaging versus snail mail, etc. Similarly, most information gathering functions for a human will be automatically uploaded in the brain. Uh, so you choose your area of interest as a person, and the feed will automatically be uploaded. So you can imagine a hard drive installed in your brain or a telepathic transmission to your brain. So, but let me just remind you here, do not confuse it with becoming a robot. We'll still have our consciousness, and we'll be driven by satiating our emotions only primarily. Like even now, all tech is driven towards convenience, right? Uh, or catering to our emotion. So whether it's the progression to digital movies, all the development in social media, the gaming companies, all of them are geared towards fulfilling our emotional, social, and convenience. Uh, as against, let's say, making us brainier, more logical, etc. Those don't fly. Um, so, so humans are getting these telepathic news speeds automatically, and they're subscribing to feeds provided by corporations. Uh, so, and in these corporations, who is creating this information on news feed? These are being created by artificial intelligence driven bots. But the perspective in these, maybe, of course, will have some human intervention or oversight. Now, um, and let me therefore say, if now news is actually automatically being created by bots and is, telepathically sent to humanoids based on their personal interest, uh, what is the role the communicator plays in such an environment? I'll come to that, but let me do a quick segue into a very interesting quote by Corey Bregman. Anubhuti, move to the next slide. As a lot of you may know, he's the founder of Breaking News. Uh, and I'm just paraphrase what he said. I'll read out rather. When news breaks in the future, it'll be covered by a multitude of eyewitnesses streaming live video, and these streams will knit together into a single immersive video. So you actually have uh, crowdsourcing from both professional and amateur sources automatically blending into a newsfeed. Next slide. I'll go back to the question that I asked earlier, which is, uh, if news is being created by bots, uh, how do you do pitching? So actually, communication will also be pitching uh, through communication run bots. Uh, and therefore, your role as a communicator will actually metamorphosize into procuring such AI bot and customizing them to your organization suited pitch. Uh, Now, all of this needs to take your imagination, take a quantum leap, and not think in terms of incremental advancements. You know, uh, so one aspect to understand here is that we'll actually have to become digital natives in the true sense, really conversant with the capabilities of various derivatives of artificial intelligence, which AI may seem homogeneous to a lot of us who haven't studied that field carefully, but those who have would realize that even in AI today, uh, there are biases coming in, which research clearly shows, which a lot of times is a function of bias that the AI's creator holds. But I'm digressing. Let me just come back. So I just uh, wanted to take you back to reminding that news is being created by bots, pitched by bots, and is being fed directly to each human being in a customized manner. Just next slide. Thank you. So our job, uh, is not to know coding and technical aspects, but it's about creating the AI based solution. Um, it's about knowing the solutions that are ruling the market at that time, and those that are there in the offing. It's to know the makers of the solution, and possibly customize basis the client's need, if you're an agency or if you're in-house, again as per your company's need. Um, our job would be to brainstorm and explore various possibilities of AI in the realm of communication. Uh, and unlike the traditional media properties that you see today, these digital and tech driven tools will have built-in predictive capabilities on which story format, which content or medium will work best in each case. Uh, Versus, right now you try five things and one format or a storyline thing sticks, it'll become far more predictive. So think about us as communicators shifting to micro targeting, geo targeting our communication, time targeting. Some of this is already happening today, but to the next logical step, which is actually geo media um, and geo targeting. Just move to the next slide. Let's understand what this is. Uh, you would have heard of genome sequencing, right? The technology is now about 3 decades old, um, or rather, this field of science. Uh, by as early as 2006, the cost of sequencing the human genome had actually come down to as little, uh, as at that time it was $14 million. Now, the cost of a DNA test, which can map your genome, is actually under 10,000 rupees. It may actually be even 6, 7,000 in India. Uh, so, nearly 10 million people have already undergone DNA tests. Uh, and, you now see, at least some of the international markets and in India as well, a lot of advertising happening on this. Uh, Currently, the benefits of these are being seen in micro targeting, cure for problems that you have now or anticipate in the future. But eventually, the evolution is going to be Genomedia will map your taste as a consumer, your tendencies, your likes, dislikes, uh, more accurately than even you know yourself. Uh, and therefore, uh, the communication will become targeted as per your own genome sequencing as well. Uh, and of course, this will have benefits not just in communication, but in other areas like finance, insurance, recruitment, etc. Uh, so just think about this for a moment. Uh, if you go to the next slide, again, give you a context of how some of the other communicators are looking at this. Uh, the creative director of Refinery 29, Pera, look at the way she's envisioned some of this. That I think you'll be able to share a taste, a sensation, a smell, uh, a shared consciousness and a version of telepathic communications. So it's all very likely. And if you lay this over with what you're now hearing about, which is the metaverse, it will transform every industry, with concerts happening in a virtual environment, sporting events, education, tourism, travel, business meetings, doctor appointments, lot more. So we have a lot of changing things on our hand. Uh, Now, let's move to the next slide and say, okay, fine. So bots are pitching to bots, uh, who are transmitting directly to audiences' brains. Uh, does our role really remain meaningful at all, or we actually just uh, in that stage scrambling to remain relevant, like advertisers will be scrambling? Uh, I personally believe that actually communicators will have a greater role to play in this new world. Uh, Why? Because they are the best suited to reinvent the art of storytelling. even in that situation. Of course, the biggest pivot would be that this storytelling and relationship building that we've been doing forever will change. But you see, the technologies that tune out ads, like the ad blockers, um, banner ads, etc., at all costs, they will become even more sophisticated. So, human or humanoids will actually continue consuming more stories, more content, whether it's augmented reality content or video content. And the only way to keep it engaging and the only set of people who know how to do it uh, are the communication folks, not the advertisers as much. Um, so, you know, the the chance for us to stand out, the chance for any communicator or advertiser to stand out, um, and connect at a deeper level will have to be through better storytelling. So that's one thing that's not going to change. Um, so, uh, if you move to the next slide, thank you. Thank you. Uh, Take this perspective from HBR. Social would be less about standalone apps and websites and more about piping of the internet. So, in the future, the internet will operate more like electricity does today, an unseen part of the infrastructure around us that we notice only when it's not present. Uh, and of course, then this puts more pressure on marketers and communicators to spread their message in a genuinely interesting and useful way, since they'll be less able to rely on interruptive display ads to get people's attention. So you understand what I was saying about why communicators' role is going to be important. So actually, this brings us to this question, this bizarre world that I've painted. What would be the jobs of tomorrow be like for communicators, and how will they change? Can you move to the next slide? So, uh, if you think about it, uh, roles such as uh, sorry, I lost my chain of thought. Uh, the extensive use of technology, and AI, robotic process automation, and advanced analytics, they're already creating ripples across value chain, right? So, think of roles such as consumer insight analyst, a social engagement manager, a data evangelism. Uh, these are the kind of roles that in comms will become mainstream. Uh, so let's move to the next slide. Let's just talk about some of these other jobs and if you can envision them. Uh, Social engagement manager, uh, social media listener, a retention analysis analyst, VR designer. These are all the integral part of comms teams. A lead of business and consumer insight, a data architect, uh, cloud software engineer, uh, a machine learning engineer. I think a combination of some or all of these will actually form a communication function in a large corporate or even on the agency side 20 years on. So, therefore, the question is, and this is where I wanted to end this, is how much of this has started happening now? And what do you do as a communicator to prepare for it? Can you move to the next slide? You know, a research had shown, and some of this research not India based, but some of the more advanced markets, but I'm presuming India would not be very different, that 50% of the new job being created, both in news media uh, and communication, are tech based roles or roles which need deep understanding of technology. um, so an analysis that a firm called Quid conducted across 15 media firms in US, and these are firms like Time Warner, Walt Disney, etc. Uh, they realized that most of these firms have started investing disproportionate amount of their budget on technology and technology platform to gear themselves for future. Uh, so what does that tell us? How do we prepare by taking away us ourselves away from the day-to-day rigmarole? Um, and I think there's no clear formula. What you need to do is take out some time, maybe half an hour every day, or maybe a couple of hours every weekend. Maybe take a sabbatical or vacation time, etc. Try and start learning some of the new technologies. Maybe give it a shot at learning an algo. And so that's one. Uh, but at the same time, you can push yourself and your organization to set aside certain time and budget to experiment using new technologies. It could be to create content, to customize, to measure using new age technologies which are being used across other industries but are not being used in comms. But at least do pilots. Force yourself to see what all can be automated, which is being done manually. Whether it's actually writing of content and press releases, or it could be even customized pitching mails to journalists. Uh, Anything, endless possibilities in the area of measurement, creativity, etc. There are some that, of course, I could name, which are branded package technologies available either in our core industry or in ancillary industry, but I'm not going to name here. Maybe we can talk about it separately. So the point that I was making is, if you want to prepare yourself for 10, 20 years ahead, there's no specific course that you'll find available, course material. There's no template. I'm actually pushing you to be a part of defining that future, and being a small part of that future by taking bold actions, doing these pilots, learning about it, and forcing yourself to do this. Sometimes, I'll just end with saying, sometimes all it takes for someone to remind you is that while you're living in the present, the future is coming. Thank you. That marks the end of my prepared notes. I'd like to welcome Udit to join me here as we do an interactive Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you, Nitin. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
All right. Thank you, Nitin, for a wonderful session. I'm sure people would have enjoyed it. And with the amount of questions we have received from the audience, it definitely means that they have enjoyed it. Without further delay, I will, directly ask you questions, right? So, my first question, Nitin, to you is, how do you see communication helping founders take Indian companies to global level?
I think very relevant for me, given that I'm working now in a large new age company which is already gone global and is also trying to open up in new countries. Let me talk about two components at least, and maybe I'll add a third one. Cross-border reputation building, uh, done smartly even today. And I know we have to bring ourselves back from 20 years forward that we went to. It can be one of the most potent low-cost tools for entry into new markets and getting global. And we've seen that in Oyo. We've done that. So I'll give you an example. Over the last 2-3 years, we've had our founder Ritesh Agarwal's social media presence ramped up on Twitter. He already has more than 1.5 lakh followers, and we know that's just a start. But what we've seen is what he says catches attention, sometimes actually gets carried in mainstream media as well. But I think one important tool that is available is to have presence, and high influence presence on social media, which can cut across countries. Uh, you can smartly, in the country you're about to enter, make sure that you are tagging, cross posting with other global influencers. Uh, and that starts getting you visibility even as you move, even before you enter a country. uh, so and you can do a lot of this actually sitting out of India, which is a lower cost market for talent. So I'll give you an example, and this is organization wide, but the comms team here also reflects similarly. About 70% of our workforce actually sits out of India, whereas India constitutes a much lesser proportion of our total revenue. So a lot is happening sitting out of here while reaching out to international markets. The second, and this is maybe a tactical way that I'll mention, that you can start looking in lens of newer markets with the help of communication, is the way you think of targeting tier 1 publications. And tier 1 is typically captured as the readership or the circulation base,
Yeah.
and the source credibility of these publications. Try and actually map country by country where you are, we have aspirations to enter on page 1 publication. Now, what I mean by that is when you do a news search in that particular country on Google about your company, which are the publications which are actually thrown and the news items that are getting thrown up in that country about, and which are those outlets that are showing up. We actually do this exercise regularly now, and we are
Okay.
very, very surprised that what we consider as tier 1, about only half of them actually get thrown up on the first page of a search in that particular country. There are a lot of other ones which we never give that much importance to. So you got to start targeting according to that.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you, Nitin. My next question is, Nitin, talking about how do you think businesses and PR firms have adopted the post-pandemic world?
I let me talk PR firms first. I saw a hockey stick, and let me explain what I mean by that is, when the pandemic hit, a lot of clients, and I would say as one of the ones being guilty, though I was in a different organization at that time, either clients stopped the retainer completely, or some reduced retainer for a quarter for the PR agencies, saying, listen, we'll come back quarter to 6 months later. Some asked for a free 3 or 4 months period, saying you continue providing us basic assistance, but we won't pay you for the next for this thing. Now, obviously, this was a massive hit on the PR firms, and I saw a lot of them shrinking costs. Some of them gave up expensive office space. Staff took some pay cuts. In some cases, not all. A lot of other discretionary, spends were sort of stopped. But I think most of them survived well. Uh, but then eventually, the other part of the hockey stick kicked in. And when I spoke to founders from PR firms like yours, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that a completely new set of companies have come in. Some of these conventional corporates or some of these startups, which actually were benefiting from tailwinds of remote working and code. They came in a massive manner, wanting to do communication because for them it was like the best time in the last decade for them as far as business is concerned. The second phenomena that I saw was, which is benefiting PR firms eventually after the initial pain, was that some money, uh, which was set aside for out of home or BTL activities, a small proportion of it started shifting to communications, while a lot of it shifted to online advertising, but com benefited from them. I think I have seen most comms firms coming out better and stronger from the post-pandemic world. I won't spend much time of how things change for the clients, but I'll just make one point because we have to take other questions as well. Is that in minds of an average large corporation, uh, the shift to online news consumption being the real test is complete. So that time of saying I needs to be in the print edition of a Times of India or a Economic Times, etc. Uh, is a conversation that's not even happening now. You are in online editions, that's good enough.
Yeah, I totally agree, Nitin. Nitin, one of my favorite questions, and I would, since we're talking about future of communication, and I think this, you need to talk about measurement, right? So, do you think that we as PR professionals and as leaders today in the industry are doing enough to solve the PR measurement problems or an issue which is there for sure? We have been trying to do that. Do you think that we are on the right path to solve this issue?
Ah, actually, you'll actually have me start ranting on this. This is one area where I personally believe that we've tried to do a lot as a function,
Yeah.
but we've been able to do precious little. I'll actually quote liberally from an article which I end up reading very often because that's a reality check for me. This is written by Ben Smith in 2019, called the fear of finding out, and the fear of finding out of the PR industry. And by the way, what's said is true as much of communication as it is for advertising and marketing. And
Yeah.
let me lay out two or three areas of weaknesses. And a lot of this is actually based on research that was done by Proof Research. Um, the biggest advantage is that advertising and communication have that hallowed seat at the table for a lot of large corporates. It's one of the most expensive but one of the most valuable investments that organizations think that they're doing. So they have a lot of expectations from comms and advertising, but at the same time there's also a huge disillusionment with whether the CCO or the CMO actually realizes what measurement matrices really matter for the organization. So, for example, a CEO will look at matrices like which really count is uh, revenue, profitability, valuation, market value share. Uh, this is the language he's talking all the time, and he's asking now, tell me how does communication help me in these matrices? This the CMO or the CCO on the same time is talking about share of voice, awareness, um, you know, other brand matrices, etc. So,
Yeah.
there's just no correlation, and this is the reason why, by the way, that there's a ever increasing influence of procurement department on agency hiring decision
Yeah.
because there's a loss of confidence amongst the chairman and the CEO on this. So, a majority of respondents in this research that I was quoted, they no longer believe that their marketing and comms team can answer the ROI question at all. And so, finance department or procurement departments are being asked to assume control over performance measurement and analytics for that. So, I don't think that comms and marketing don't realize the importance of measurement. But I genuinely feel this is an area that they've tried, but they've not really succeeded till now.
Okay. So we still need to keep working hard on the measurement part. I think we're still lagging here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, this is my last question, and then I move to the audience questions, Nitin. And this is related to, with so many PR firms are mushrooming, especially during the pandemic as well, right? And before also. How does a leader like you select a PR firm or a PR partner for the mandate?
There are two things on a extreme spectrum of the Rubicon here.
Yeah.
Okay, one is a trap that companies have gotten themselves into. Uh, no real fault of PR firms, which is the race to the bottom on retainers. Uh, as you rightly said, this for a PR firm there are very low entry barriers in this field. New one firms can come in a 2-person company or a 10 people company, etc. And therefore when agencies call, when companies call for a pitch, and now that I mentioned to you, procurement departments started playing a disproportionate role. um, there's a race to the bottom on retainers that happen on one end. This is for a large part of companies, and
Yeah.
what this does is that does not allow enough investment in talent and training for PR firms. So it's a catch-22 situation they get into, and therefore when you don't have well-trained talent or high-quality talent, that obviously starts leading to disappointments. Uh, with the agency, and let me actually quote a very senior leader from Oyo. I won't exactly quote him, but I think he's told me often enough that, and he's also been a management consultant in the past, and now he's a operator or a practitioner. But he says, having worked across various fields and functions which handle PNL, or even the non-PLL ones, he believes that comms gets relatively the most inferior talent versus other professions. So, in other words, it is almost the last port of choice for a large swath of very talented people when they are trying to choose their career.
Hmm.
And that ends up showing up. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's one end of spectrum. Uh, Even if I talk about clients who are actually willing to scale up their budgets on comms uh, and try and work with very large firms, uh, the reality that they get hit with is that the expertise that they were expecting either at even a tactical level, for instance, deep understanding of editorial style of publications and being able to advise the clients, or research based intelligence on each journalist, it actually doesn't come through.
Yeah.
It's there in bits and parts in various team members of spread across the organization, etc. It's not even structured. Or even if I take it to strategic level, right? the guidance on how to really take a step back and look at communication um, for your client in a very strategic manner. What is the role it can play in some of the matrices that I measured earlier, even
Yeah.
and the benchmarking with international and Indian organization, even that doesn't exist to the sophistication it should. So I digress slightly from your question, but I think the choice that the smaller organization make and continue to make will be very price sensitive, price based,
Yeah.
while doing. And for larger mandates, it'll really have to be high quality, well trained talent backed by adequate new age technologies and knowledge, uh, with enough time and bandwidth available of those resources which are put on the account to really invest meaningfully in that particular client. Uh, this is what will matter.
Okay. Thank you. So Nitin, now we move on to the audience question. My first question from the audience has been asked from Kamaljeet. The question is, how has PR helped OYO accelerate industry transformation and innovations, turning the challenges of a post-pandemic era into opportunities for the future?
Yeah. So one aspect that I addressed, of course, was helping in entry in newer markets. Uh,
Yeah.
but actually, in many ways, by the way, uh, let me give an example. I'll give two examples. One of the things that uh, by the way, when the pandemic hit, OS revenues dropped by 70%. Hospitality is one of the largest hit industries. Uh, Anyways, one went back to the drawing board, tried to figure out as an organization what to do. Uh, there are two or three things started emerging as some of the lockdowns started easing. Uh, was that what a consumer expected from his stay in a hotel or a home? The topmost important factors had changed dramatically. Uh, Health and hygiene became the primemost factor, and the belief in health and hygiene was, key. One is you've done it. Second is how do you prove to me that you have, right? Uh, OYO started a program called Sanitize Before Your Eyes, which was basically to advertise to say that while we will sanitize the room and the hotel area that you stay in, but we know that how would you know whether that's been done or not? So we'll actually clean those surfaces, etc., as per pre-made protocol in front of your eyes. It'll take 15 minutes, but you'll have the satisfaction everything is sanitized. There was almost zero advertising budget spent um, in propagating this program. Most of this was communication driven. So while you created this program as an organization, how do you take it out? Um, and this was again done through conventional PR, through the use of our social media channels, smartly using our top executive who have a lot of social media presence, etc. So this whole program was run on the back of communication as an engine. Let me give you another example. Because we were hit, like a lot of other organizations, we had to do a lot of layoffs. So even on culture communication, on the culture side rather, the morale was very low. So there was a stage where OYO was one of the companies which was getting a lot of criticism,
Yeah.
thanks to the layoffs on fitness as an organization. Uh, to a stage where when wave 2 hit, uh, the company started a whole host of activities. One that stands out in my mind is shifting to a 4-day week.
Yeah.
And I know a few other companies also did it. But uh, the powerful manner that comms used to make it widely known in the startup world completely shifted the narrative around OYO as a employer and what it was doing. Uh, there are many other examples. There's an interesting program called Vaccinate, which was run completely on the back of communication. But I guess we have to take other questions. So
Yes.
I, if the questions sent to me, I can write back on some of the other ways that communications helped during this period.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, this question has been asked from Pooja Saxena. How do you manage the challenges which are there in the market for the brand? I think she meant, I think again, we have spoken about the challenges as well. But
Yeah, yeah. This is a very open-ended question. Is it meant towards
towards, I think, OYO
OYO?
only.
Is it meant
Yeah,
towards
towards
comms as an industry?
yeah.
Uh,
So I think towards OYO, we have just spoken. Why don't you talk about the industry as a whole? How did we manage the challenges?
I think we actually covered that as well, right? On how the PR agency ecosystem manage the whole transition.
So the other question which is there is, again, this is related to you. You spent around a decade in Max Group, and now starting a new journey with OYO, which is slightly a difficult stage at this moment right now. How has the journey been so far? Because from Max to Unicorn, what are the challenges you have faced, and what are the changes which have taken place? This has been
Yeah,
asked by Patanjali.
yeah. Actually, I'm not a unicorn, but a decacorn again
Yeah,
now. So uh, just drawing that distinction. Uh, yeah, actually, very different worlds. I completely agree. I must admit that getting used to an entirely different pace of work did take some coping up. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll talk about what the two or three differences that I've seen. One, the average density of smart people around me is much more.
Okay.
So I think what ends up happening with some of these really large new age companies is that they end up attracting some of the best talent. I'm not talking communication field per se, other colleagues around. Uh, Stands true for comms function as well, but otherwise. So you actually have a fair sprinkling of people who have come from very pedigreed organizations, um, or from pedigreed educational institutions, right from Harvard, Wharton, ISB, IIM, etc. So a whole host of stuff. So one thing I have to be very conscious while conversing with people here is you have to really think deeply about what you're saying and what you're advising about, because you
Yeah.
have really sharp people around. The second is again just that mindset of the pace at which things will happen. Completely different thing. People will talk here in days and weeks at best in kickstarting something. And I personally had the experience of, in my mind, for instance, thinking of turning around a particular campaign in 1 week. Um, and because I was relatively new, I didn't say, okay, we have 1 week to do this. I just asked the team, the comms team, okay, how quickly do you think we can turn this around? Uh, they said actually 2 3 days, but we can give it a shot in 1 day, and they actually did it in 1 day. So
Yeah.
it was a wake up call for me as well to say I need to shift my mental models around the pace of work. The third thing is actually the respect that you get from people, whether it's from media houses and other people. The complexities are also a lot, but the respect that you get for someone in a ripe age, old of 47, making this shift to a high-paced new age organization. So I enjoy part of that as well. The fourth part that I want to talk about is that DNA wise, this is a technology company, not a hospitality company, and very, very data and analysis driven. So when I started attending the business calls, daily morning business calls, um, I was thinking that, and these are large leadership team call, the discussion would go in the following sequence: that you have a problem statement being discussed, then a reasoning, a hypothesis, and a conclusion. This is how typically
Yeah.
such sessions goes. Here, every problem statement comes with, the next step from that comes a very, very deep rooted, data driven, micro analyzed solution. uh, and so no discussion is around hypothesis, hunch, feel,
Yeah.
nothing. And it's just blown me away of the kind of depth that you can go. So all the stuff that we keep hearing about, analysis and big data and stuff, I see my playing out in front of my eyes on the business side on a day-to-day level. So I guess
Yeah.
these four.
Okay. Thank you. We have almost run out of time, Nitin, but last question from Amani. That's an interesting question to be very honest. So she's asked how communication should be driven for a brand like OYO, sorry, for a brand aiming for an IPO?
Good question. This is what I've been thinking for the last 1 month and living every day as Oyo move towards its IPO.
Yeah.
You know, um, so I think one of the realizations that you guys will have is I could give you a lot of. Okay, let me give you two or three perspectives. One is communication in the phase towards IPO is unfortunately um, highly regulated. So, what a lot of you may not have realized till you actually being a part of an IPO process is that there are very strict laws of not being allowed to talk about any future driven communication. So you can't say, I'm looking at a bright, rosy future. In 1 year, I anticipate the company to be here and there. Think about it. Most of the news creation is about what you anticipate happening in the future, and you're not allowed to say that.
Hmm.
Um, uh, so on one side, there's a lot of constraints coming on what you can say and not say. But on the other side, you also have huge heightened media attention. So some of the smaller aspects about you, which the media would normally not pay attention to, you have the opportunity to take them, and you can actually see media lapping it up like
Yeah.
anything. So right now, it's actually whatever my lawyers do not constrain me with, I can
Hmm.
actually take out, and I'm guaranteed the media will immediately take it and lap it up. But that's just one small aspect. I know
Hmm.
we've run out of time, but I'll take 3 4 minutes.
Yeah.
You actually so in an IPO, there are two major components, and these are all new learnings for me as well. One is what is called institutional marketing and communication. So this is marketing to the large institution who will place big orders on the IPO. The other, which is called the retail marketing component, and this is marketing and communication to the public at large, to the potential retail investors, and to the HNI community. And this is a very fascinating area to build, to see which geographies do subscriptions mainly come from by an IPO, which channels do they come from. So for instance, do they come now from the new age discount brokers like Zerodha, Stocks, Grow? Do they come from the ASBA channel? Do they come from retail broker channels? And how do you market to them? The third, which again has been very really fun for me to do, is communication to the finfluencer community. Uh, so, in simple words, the financial influencers. So you would have heard of people like Rachna Ranade and all. At least those of you who've had a chance to do financial communication. Now these are financial influencers who have their own channels on YouTube, Twitter, etc., with tens of lakhs of followers. Each video of theirs gets lakhs and lakhs of views, and they talk about areas such as personal finance, investing, um, IPO prospects, etc. Again, a very interesting field that I'm involved in and in the midst of doing. So lots of interesting learnings. Any of the audience members here whose company is about to go for an IPO and who needs some tips on communication, uh, please feel to reach out to me directly. There are lots of learnings I've had in the last 2 3 months which I can share.
There. So it was a wonderful session. In fact, we could have gone on and on about the future of communications. There is so much to talk there. So thank you so much, Nitin, for this wonderful crystal ball gazing into the future, and of course, thank you, Udit, for your questions that really enhanced our understanding. I'm sure the audience is going away with lots of learning. Thank you to all our attendees as well for taking the time out this evening. We'll be back with another session of the masterclass next month on Wednesday, 8th of December, to delve deeper into another aspect of communications. See you soon, everyone. Thank you.